And there we, okay, so everyone can just accept that. This meeting is held under the authority of the executive order in force until April 1st, 2022 of the remote meeting provisions, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. If you need any detail on that, you can find it on the open meeting law website. All votes will be taken by roll call vote. For everyone on Zoom, if you haven't already done so, please identify yourself on the screen. You can do this by clicking on the three dots that are in the upper right of you mouse over your picture, and you can use the rename feature to put your name in. I'm going to request that everyone mute their microphones if they're not talking. In the event of any technical difficulties, which of course never happen, where Zoom becomes unavailable and we can't recover within 5 minutes, this meeting will be ended and all matters in the agenda will be continued automatically to the next advisory committee meeting. As you'll note in the agenda, we do have space for members of the public to have an opportunity to ask questions and provide comments and give feedback. And we will open those up from time to time. Please use your raise the hand feature or wave at us, and the co-chairs will call on you. And when called on, please identify yourself with name and address. We'd ask that you limit any comments to up to 2 minutes. Thanks for your patience and understanding. The minutes for tonight's meeting will be taken by committee member Adrian Boardman. Adrian, thank you again for offering to do that. At this time, I will ask committee members to indicate that they are present. When I call their name, please speak out. Richard Follander.
Present.
John Soden.
Present.
Deb Edelman is not present. I know that. Adrian Boardman.
Present.
Dorcas Miller. Dorcas, are you here?
You're muted.
You're muted. And you?
Present.
Present. Thank you, Dorcas. Sam Stearns, new member, is not here yet.
Present.
Oh, there he is. Sorry.
Yeah.
Present. Sam Stearns. Thank you. That'd be faster. Tracy Hansen.
Present.
And Nat Welch, I am here as well. We have 2, 4, 6, 7 members, and we have a quorum tonight. I'd like to note that we have 2 new members approved by the select board and sworn in today. There is a 3rd member to be sworn in who was approved also, but Tracy Hansen is one of our new members and grew up in Harvard, came to Concord a few years ago. She's a resident of Hill Street. Her favorite hobby has been cycling since 2012, when she decided to try a triathlon and fell in love with the sport, which is great. Professionally, Tracy is in the medical device product management, and prior to that, she was in sales in the medical space. She wants to give back to the town and to the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Advisory Committee, and it fits well with her interests and knowledge of the local rail trails. I'd like to welcome Tracy on board. Sam, I was going to make up something about Sam. Do you just want to give us a quick intro on you?
Sure. Sorry, Nat. Good evening, everyone. Hi, I'm Sam Stearns. I lived in Concord for about 6 years now with my wife and have 3 young boys. Professionally, I started my career in consulting and now work in healthcare IT, and I'm a very enthusiastic user of the Freeman Rail Trail for running, and then also with my kids. So excited to be aboard.
Welcome aboard. Our next agenda item is to approve the minutes from the November meeting. Are there any edits to the minutes that committee members want to suggest? Richard?
I mentioned to Adrian that the title of Patricia Ruiz was not quite correct. Did you get that note from me, Adrian?
I did, yeah. So I can
Okay.
make that change, and then Nat
make it.
send you or Marcia, whoever's needed, the update.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay,
Other than
great.
that,
Thank you.
it's good.
Thank you, Adrian. Any other comments or questions on the minutes?
I move we approve the minutes.
Second.
Seconded. Roll call vote to approve the minutes. Mr. Boardman? Ms. Boardman, sorry.
I approve.
Mr. Follander?
Aye.
Ms. Hansen? Ms. Hansen? Tracy?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said it. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
You get to vote on the minutes even though you weren't there.
Yes, that's true.
Aye.
Well, you were there, I think, but
I
you
was
didn't.
there.
Right. Ms. Miller,
Yes, aye.
Mr. Soden,
Aye.
Mr. Stearns,
Aye.
and I, Mr. Wells approves. The minutes are approved unanimously by the members present. Thank you. I'd like to invite Marcia Rasmussen, Director of Planning and Land Management, to provide her monthly update. Committee members have received a copy of this memo, and I believe it is or will be posted on the website. Marcia, you have the floor.
Thank you. It is posted, and 2A is already open and available. 2B, I spoke with the project manager just yesterday. The final bridge rails have been installed and the overhang brackets are being removed this week and next. The project will be shut down for the winter by the end of next week. There will be chain link panels established at both sides or both ends of the bridge to prevent unauthorized use of the bridge over the winter. The bioretention basin issue that I identified in a couple of prior meetings has not yet been resolved. They hope to resolve it over the winter, so work can proceed in the spring as soon as the weather is warm enough and fair enough. And hopefully we won't have too much snow or too much rain come next spring. For the 2C updates, the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Advisory Committee conducted their site visit around Junction Park on November 16th. That was videotaped, and the videographer will be should have posted that video. I haven't yet obtained a link. It may be on the MMN, the Minuteman Network website under as a YouTube video. I'm not sure, so I don't yet have as soon as I get the link, I will provide it to all of you. Nat and Richard also requested that we have a generic email address for the committee, and that has been established as bfrtac@concordma.gov. Currently, I have 4 members signed up to receive those emails. That's Nat Welch, Richard Follender, Adrian Boardman, and Deborah Edelman. Other members who would like to receive these messages can also, I can add you to that list. I would ask that not everybody respond to each one, maybe designate one person as a responder. If you choose to respond, I'm hoping that this would be used primarily as a way for the public to provide input to the committee. But that's a situation or an issue that the co-chairs should probably determine how best to address that. For the last half mile of phase 2C, the Mass DOT project manager, Emin Kernan, indicated that he has prepared a draft response to the questions that have been asked by our consultant, GPI, regarding the Mass DOT's position on the rail, on the railings that have been requested on the westerly side of the trail, that is on the west side near the Stone Root Lane properties, and the metal fence that's been requested for the White Pond side or the easterly side. He says that's been prepared, but is still being reviewed by Mass DOT, so I do not yet have a response. Additionally, I've presented the BRFT's additional funding request to the Community Preservation Committee, both on November 9th and at their hearing November 30th. And the CPC has asked me to sharpen my pencil on this year's request made by DPLM. My staff and I submitted 6 of the 12 projects that are being reviewed, and it totals to close to $2 million just for the projects that have been submitted. Of the various projects that DPLM has submitted, I think the one that might have the greatest potential for delaying for a year is the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. Currently, there is a 2-rail fence that is part of the construction documentation for phase 2D and the last half mile of the trail in Concord. And as long as it's in the contract, and if we've identified additional funds after the fact, that can be used as a change order. So my recommendation would be to reduce the request to the Community Preservation Committee by $190,000 for that 2-rail fence along the westerly side of the trail. I will continue to seek funding for the metal rail fence because it is unlikely that the decorative metal fence would be part of the contract documents. And we know that some kind of fencing would be provided, probably a 3-rail fence because of the steep slope on the easterly side of the trail that goes down to White Pond itself. And so the differential for that is about $30,000. That's $20,000 for the fence itself, about 500 linear feet, plus 2 gates, plus a contingency. So the total is $30,000. So my total request to the CPC, I'm going to be recommending that it be reduced from $300,000 to $80,000. That would allow for an additional $50,000 for the benches, fencing, landscaping, signage that we've been discussing for other aspects of the trail for 2C and 2B. 2C being the major portion in Concord and 2B being the portion over the bridge over Route 2.
Marsha, one question. Sorry, I just want to make sure I'm capturing it correctly in the minutes. And I was trying to follow the math and type at the same time.
Yeah.
So the existing request is for 300,000 and you're looking to reduce it by 190. So that would be it's 110.
Not quite, because in the CPC application, I included the entire cost of the metal rail, the decorative metal fence. And as I noted, there's a differential between a 3-rail fence and the decorative metal rail fence. So my reduction is actually 220.
Okay.
Thank you for noting that.
So the result is that we have to wait to hear from Mass DOT. So what they will approve, and then we're hoping that we will have additional funding from the CPC.
If needed.
If needed, right. Okay, that's good.
I'm still hopeful that Mass DOT will honor what was done in 2014. The work that the former members of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Advisory Committee prepared and in those documents from 2014. So that will be my request to Mass DOT and we'll continue.
Okay, and just for the newer members, over the past few months, there's been a lot of concern by residents around White's Pond and in Stone Root Lane about the fencing, both to obviously provide some safety, but also to ensure that people don't go cruising down to the pond, just parking their bikes and heading down to the pond. It's a hot subject, and either Richard or I would be happy to talk to any of the newer members if you want to get a little bit of background on it. I expect that once we hear from Mass DOT, it'll become a hot issue for us again to, for the residents to have a conversation about. To a little context, and also since we're talking about 2C, Marcia, I just wanted to check on the email we received from a Mr. Kirshen, who asked about the soft shoulders on the side being made wider than the existing sections in Concord for environmental and walking purposes. Any thoughts or comments on that?
Well, my comment is that the existing right-of-way or the existing design is what the recommendation of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Advisory Committee had been. Widening that path any further means additional trees will have to be removed. And one of the concerns that was raised early on is to try to save as many of the existing trees as possible. So the Advisory Committee had previously recommended a 14-foot wide clearance. That's a 10-foot wide path with 2-foot shoulders on either side. And this committee certainly could make a change. It would have to be done fairly quickly because the plans are going to 100% design to make that revision.
Right. I think I'll just ask other committee members for their opinion. I think I would defer to the work done by the committee over the past few years, and I will trust their work and wisdom. Any other comments from the committee members? Sean?
I have a question, Marcia. Do you know anything about the staking that was alluded to in that email?
I think the stakes that were placed were located there last spring when we were trying to help the residents understand
Right.
the dimensions of the full dimension of the right of way, that 100-foot right of way. I never went back to remove them. So I think that may be part of the question that
Okay.
Mr. Kirshen is raising. And
Yep.
so I might need to go out there next week.
In that, I
We have-
agree with you. I think that we have to respect the work that the committee's done in the past, and especially the close outreach there's been with the residents there. And I think it's a slippery, maybe precedent if we start undoing some of those things that have already been discussed, unless there's wide, support or advocacy from the residents that we've already worked with. So I share your tendency to want to, respect the work that's already been done.
Now, Sam, you're a runner, right? So that I think, is that part of the argument? I don't disagree with anything anybody else has said. I just wonder, from a runner's point of view, is that?
Yeah, I think I'm learning. I wouldn't have a strong opinion at this time.
Okay. Okay, good. And I suggest we move forward. And Barbara Pike, you have your hand raised. I will call on you.
Yes, I guess it's okay to make a comment or a question at this.
I'm inviting you to, yeah.
Okay, well, Marcia referred to the fencing that the advisory committee had recommended in 2014. And it's my impression that the fencing that's been submitted in the most recent document is somewhat different from that. Is that the case?
That is correct. What I meant by the fact that there's fencing at all being proposed on the westerly side is what was recommended in 2014 after extensive outreach between the committee and the neighborhood, as well as the wrought iron fence.
So how would you characterize the difference between what was approved in 2014 and what's now in the documents?
Well, what Mass DOT is saying today is that the plans of 2014 were not approved, however, by them. But there is a letter from the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Advisory Committee to the town manager of Concord at that time, Chris Whalen, to recommend that fencing be provided on both sides of the trail.
Right. And I think, Barbara, that my understanding of the difference is we actually added a little more fencing on the White Pond side if I may be wrong, Marcia, I seem to remember that we talked a little bit about pushing the wooden railing fence a little farther to the south on the White Pond side, because the residents asked us to consider that. Is that correct?
Yes,
Well,
that is correct.
it's my recollection that the advisory committee worked with the homeowners one by one to get sort of personalized fencing, and it wasn't the 2 or 3 rail fence for the entire length. That some homeowners wanted something up closer to their homes and some
Right.
didn't want any at all. So
The fencing that is shown today is based on the input provided by residents this past spring.
that's
As we
yeah,
were,
that's my
Yeah.
impression that
Yeah.
as
that
the
the
advisory
fencing,
committee continued those conversations.
right, that the fencing that's being proposed at this time is not the fencing that was proposed in 2014.
Correct.
Yeah.
I think, Marcia, the original reference I think you made to the 2014 was about the width of the trail, right? And that was like the basis of the email that I think you and Nat had received, is making the shoulders
Correct.
wider,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
Okay. I'd like to move on. Marcia, you want to carry on with point number
Certainly.
5?
Just phase 2D, that portion in Sudbury, I provided the committee with information about the MIPA process. The only reason that you might be interested in following it is if there are any problems or issues that might cause delays for this section. It means delays for the last half mile in Concord. So there's information there if you wanted to follow up with NEPA. And then the fact that the Sudbury design consultant provided a schedule update, has some concerns about the outreach with Mass DOT Rail and 3 major property owners. So they're recommending that Sudbury staff focus their efforts in early January to meet with the rail division and with those property owners so that things stay on track. So, and I mean that, and that we have a project that is ready to be advertised in the fall of 2022.
For new members, the issue is that while the last half mile is in Concord and Sudbury's is a 4 mile roughly section in Sudbury, the 2 projects are they're combined in the bid and getting done at the same time since they're going to connect to each other at the Concord Sudbury line. So as goes Sudbury, go we, or whatever the saying is.
Right. The reason to see that last half mile was not completed in 2018 is because Mass DOT did not want to have a trail that ended in the middle of the woods and have to create a turnaround for emergency vehicles. So that's a little bit of the backstory there. Next is the Community Connections Grant. I have some concerns that Concord Public Works it has not yet started installation of the bike shelters and the storage racks. And they have not yet provided me with a schedule, but I am keeping after them and hope that they are putting that in. Hopefully the weather will stay with us and that they will be able to proceed with getting that installed before the December 31st deadline. If I need to request an additional extension, I'm hopeful that it would be granted, but I can't guarantee that. And I don't know what will end up. So I'm just keeping fingers crossed and will continue to reach out to Concord Public Works. And then on the Concord Prison Cemetery project, I think I provided some information at the last meeting with some photographs in the last update memo. I did talk with the design consultant, Freeman Peterson. They are also the design consultant for Giroux, the park development on the northern side of Warner's Pond. And the consultant agrees that the location that's been identified is a great location and will provide us with a quote for designing that piece of the trail. And I believe that Department of Corrections facilities manager Jeff Quick would then plan to have his crews work on it in the spring. So we're going to hopefully get that to proceed. And that's my report. Are there any further questions?
Questions from the committee members? Okay.
Been a busy month.
Marcia, thank you again, and thank you to your staff for all the work that you guys do. We really appreciate it. Before we get to the main topic tonight, I wanted to update the committee on a request from that we had made in the letter to the town manager to allow a Concord Middle School class to place temporary art and information signs along the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail between Williams Road and Powder Mill Road. And I called the town manager's office today, was told that the letter is there. And I asked if they at some point could review it and provide approval so that we can provide some support to this class who has a great little project that they're working on. But as of 5 o'clock, it had not been signed off yet by the town manager. So tonight's deliberation is focused on Junction Park, the Junction Park Conceptual Redesign Task. And committee members were sent for discussion purposes a 2-page kind of overview of the redesign task, copy of the set of questions that had come up at the at the site walk on the 16th. It's a complicated process that we're gonna go through. And this meeting is dedicated to discussing the process and coming up with an approach to follow. And so we're not going to talk about possible solutions. We're going to talk about how we're going to get to a recommendation or recommendations that we can make to the select board. Or as I said, our first action was to hold the site walk. As Marcia noted in the report, 22 people attended that walk, including bicyclists, pedestrians. We had an attendee in a wheelchair, and it was quite a spirited walk and conversation. I think everyone got a good sense of what the space looked like. New members, if you haven't had a chance to go down to Junction Park, I'm sure any one of the other members would be happy to walk you through and give you a sense of it.
They were at the walk, except for Mary.
Okay, that's right. Yeah, both Sam and Tracy were. Right, good. Mary Beth. All right. We also got a firsthand look at the problems and challenges, including, ironically, a couple of cyclists who rode right through Junction Park while we were there, as if to underscore the importance of the issue. I don't think we could have scripted it either any worse or any better. So tonight, what we're going to try and do is review the task and the context, discuss a methodology or process to approach it, discuss core design principles for the work, identify the groups, constituents, and interest groups that should be included. And of course, if we miss anybody in our discussion tonight, they can always still join the conversation. Take a look at the questions and think together what we want to do with them, and then discuss kind of what additional public hearings external to our committee meetings we should have, how many the goals might be, when we might do it, and end the meeting, kind of having accomplished these things. Are these objectives reasonable to the committee? Any comments or thoughts, things you want to add, things you want to take off? Okay. I will plow ahead. Yes, Tracy.
Which document should we be looking at right now? Is it the one that says for discussion purposes?
We're going to start the one that says for discussion purposes.
Okay.
And I don't know if it's been posted yet, Marcia, but if it hasn't been posted by now, it will be shortly, and members of the public can take a look at it.
We did not receive it in time, and I had no one today who
Okay.
was able to post it. So
My
I will
apologies.
ask tomorrow.
I'm the one who created it and was delayed in getting it out. So this was, I will take full accountability for that. So the context for the task is on October 25th, I think. Some of us met with the select board at the select board meeting, and they asked us to come up with a conceptual redesign of Junction Park to ensure the safety and separation for two types of users. I generated these two categories: wheeled recreational users and cyclists, skateboards, scooter, people using scooters, rollerbladers, etc. And then pedestrians or park users, people on foot, dog walkers, wheelchair users, strollers, people on crutches, whatever. But the issue of safety was what brought this issue to a head. And so the select board has asked us to figure out a way to provide safety and separation of the people using the rail trail from the people using the park. We're not precluding one going onto the other's thing, but we don't want people riding through, for example. And the second part of this was to include a recommendation for a short-term proposal that augments the signage and helps address increased ridership that will happen after the completion of the Route 2 bridge. So these are the two things we're working on, and we called it a conceptual redesign because we're not going to, have an architect come in and do work and develop plans. We're going to say, here's what we think are some potential approaches, and here's our recommendation to the town to think about it. And then others can take up the work and see what happens. So those are the two deliverables: short-term and a long-term conceptual redesign. Questions, comments? Richard?
I have one comment. I think that when we look at the two constituencies, if you want to call it that, I think it's really, I see it as trail users and park users, and there'll be an overlap with some of those folks, but that seems to me to be the the distinction, because if we just say pedestrians,
Yeah.
pedestrians may or may not be trail users, but
Got it.
wheeled vehicles probably are if they're not a wheelchair or something. So I think I think conceptually it's the trail users and park users and those conflicts, and how can we ensure that they're minimized or completely or eliminated as much as possible.
I think it's a great addition. Other comments?
I was just gonna say, and then the commuters, which maybe don't fit in either category.
True. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
sort of an interesting. Yeah, they're just piling through.
Would it make sense to think about their intent? In other words, trail users are intent on using the trail and going through. Park users are intent on using the park, and commuters use the park to come in and out of the train station. So I think at least my take is that your way of separating them makes sense. Other comments? Okay. The timing for this is, oh, I'm sorry, I just have to note one thing. Deb raised a question to me because she's unable to be here tonight. Debbie Adelman, our missing committee member, raised a question of our remit for the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Advisory Committee versus other West Concord committees with an interest in the area. And I don't have an answer, but I just wanted to raise that and that perhaps falls into the groups that are interested and should be part of the conversation. But I think our remit takes place in the two parcels of land upon which Junction Park sits. One is the railroad right-of-way, and if you would like further detail, Marcia has captured and put on the website a fair number of documents relating to where Junction Park came from and what it looks like. But those two pieces of property are really the area that we're looking at, and we formally only have advisory capacity on the right-of-way, which is 1/2 of Junction Park. The timing is a fun.
Nat, I thought just as a member of the select board, as your liaison, I would just also weigh in on the remit question, which is that there were a number of committees that could have taken the lead on this process, but the select board, thanks to your volunteering, has selected the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Committee to do it. So I think that really is more the reason here than other kinds of charter related aspects.
Thank you. We are happy to be here. Richard.
I don't have.
Oh, okay. Oh, so your hand raised. Timing, the select board has asked for a final report by June 30th, 2022. One thought is that it would probably be helpful if in April or early May, we were able to say to the public, here are our ideas, what have we missed, and kind of clean up a recommendation that we can give to the select board. Thoughts and comments on timing?
Nat, is the June 30th, is that the timeline for the permanent solution or the short term or both?
That's the timeline for us making a recommendation to the town. It's as you saw when you were there, Tracy, it's pretty complicated and there's a lot of, a lot of pieces to it. And so the thought was we could help the town by coming up with here's an idea for how you might make a permanent solution. The actual execution falls on the shoulders of first, I think, the select board deciding what to do and how they move it through the process. Does it eventually become, go to town meeting, or does it get, passed and passed on to, the town staff to do the work on it? I mean, in some senses, our job is hard, but it's also much easier because we don't actually have to make it happen. We can come up with the best idea ever, and it'll work perfectly. Any other thoughts or comments on timing? Okay. So just thought it would be useful to mention some of the constraints that we have. That we don't have funding. We're not a funded committee. So we're not hiring experts or paying for studies, but we can certainly, from our conversations with the public and our own deliberations, think about recommendations. I think we have heard from people who have some experience in the public and residents. People who are who have landscape architecture experience or other kinds of experience will certainly welcome their comments and thinking into the process, but we're not paying them. I talked already a little bit about kind of the area that we're focused on. So it's the right of way and the adjacent town-owned parcel that sits between Commonwealth Avenue and the train station. The other thing that we pay attention to is the impact on the open meeting laws on our ability to draft and discuss the process. So, if we need any guidance, we'll talk to the town clerk, but initially our thinking is we'll do it as a committee. We're not going to form separate subcommittees. That requires a lot of overhead to do that. So the thinking was we'd work as a committee to do it and maybe parcel out work to different members who want to take it up and then bring that work back to the committee and share their thinking and findings. Comments, other thoughts, other constraints we haven't thought of? Okay. I'd just like to pause for a second and see if anybody in the public has any comments on deliverables, timings, and constraints. Okay. So a suggested process was to have a series of public meetings, a couple separate from our monthly Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Advisory Committee meetings, and hold those public meetings in a large area where we could get community input and they could help shape the conceptual redesign. We would use our regular committee meetings to take up the results of the public meeting and move the process forward with discussion, deliberation, and roll call votes as needed or as advised for certain aspects of it. And then, we draft our recommendations, the drafting process to be determined, share the draft with the public, and then vote on recommendations and write them up and submit them to the town. So that's the process we've been thinking about. Questions, thoughts, additions?
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
thinking meetings are good. It would be great to, I think you've done this in the past, but basically just monitor the traffic and whether we can just have a video that's running for a day or something like that. And then
Of the park.
Of the park.
Yeah.
And maybe we could take turns standing by and just, I don't know, whether we're holding up signs and trying to reroute traffic and see if it's successful, or maybe we're standing there and trying to engage people and get feedback of the people who are actually there. We might get a broader reach than just having a meeting. People are busy.
Right, to do something actually on the site and engage people in the moment.
That's what I'm wondering, yeah.
That's interesting. That's an interesting idea. Other thoughts on that?
Yeah, just building on that, I'm sort of struck to the comment earlier around the commuters versus the rail trail users versus the park users. How is it different for each one of them? When are they there? How do they operate? Just understanding that from the community perspective.
Okay. So it sounds like some monitoring process should be part of our deliberations.
Yeah, Nat, I think something that just came to mind, I think, Sam, based on what you and Tracy were just saying, is I think these community forums are great to get the feedback and the input of people that know they want to be engaged in the process. But I think there's a lot of people that are going to be impacted by the output of our recommendations that may not even know that they need to have a voice or need to raise their concerns. So if we have some members on the street doing cold interviews or asking people questions, I think that we're going to get input from people who this impacts in a really great way, but might not be the target base who's going to spend time with us on a Zoom or in a public forum. So yeah, I think, Tracy, I like that idea of finding other ways to engage with the people who this is impacting.
And I'm happy to help with that. I like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It would seem like, given the weather situation, the sooner we do that, the better, in terms of especially people on bicycles.
What weather? It's always beautiful here. So, Dorcas, you raised your hand?
Two things. One was the weather. Second was, if we do this, then we should put together some sort of interview questionnaire, something, so that the it's not just a free-flowing asking questions. Everybody might ask different questions. So we should put together some sort of interview process.
Anybody have experience in that kind of an interviewing process? I think it's a great idea. I wouldn't know.
Yeah.
You do?
Yeah, I've put together surveys for product design and things like that. We could also make, we could also have a link to a digital survey and post like a QR code that people could just scan with their phone and then take the survey easily.
Great idea.
We could put it all around town.
And definitely around Junction Park. Yeah. So the interview piece is interesting, I think, and the QR code. And I'm thinking of, I'm also aware that members of the Green Thumbs have, from time to time, as part of their kind of building momentum around a redesign, prior to bringing it to the select board, did some of the kind of site monitoring to see what was going on. And maybe the Green Thumbs, Dorcas, you're a member of the Green Thumbs, right?
Yeah, yes.
You know, maybe we could coordinate with them in terms of some of this monitoring piece, so we could get some data. I do ride my bike in January, but not everybody does that. So,
Yeah. And once it snows, it's not, the trail won't be plowed. So.
Right. So it feels like an action item to come up with, you know, the start of a survey. Thoughts about how we might do that?
I'm curious if Marcia or someone from the town also has any like best practices. I know the past couple of weeks I've received, it seems like through different town alerts, you know, the opportunity to weigh in on different topics. So maybe in an effort not to recreate the wheel, there's someone that could let us know how it's been done in the past, so we at least know what framework to follow, or things that have worked well or things that haven't worked well.
Marcia?
Not saying Marcia needs to do the work, but it'd be,
No, if I may,
great if someone could tell us how it traditionally works.
Erin Stevens is the town's public information officer, and she's the person who has helped the planning division get a lot of the surveys out. So if Tracy can help develop some questions, Erin can put those into a format. We currently have some economic vitality surveys out and a transportation survey for people who don't have vehicles, and those are currently out and available, and that was due to Erin's great work. So I can put you in touch with Erin, Tracy, and be happy to help coordinate that.
Yeah, sounds good.
And then in terms of reviewing a survey, Marcia, because I'm sensitive to open meeting laws and not doing deliberations without a public hearing, how would we provide input to Tracy to think about the questions, or maybe add something to it?
Well, once the questions have been drafted, we could submit it to the committee members and ask for your input and feedback directly to Erin Stevens.
Got it.
And then
Okay.
Erin would take those comments and finalize the survey.
Okay, that sounds good. Tracy, are you comfortable
Yeah.
volunteering? And thank you.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, so I can put some questions together and then share it with this group to add further.
Okay. Yes, that would be great.
Okay.
I think it's a really good idea. Richard?
Is there a due date for that you have in mind?
So our next meeting is January 4th. January 6th, I'm sorry, January 6th. I know it's getting close to the holiday time. Do you think Tracy, how would you feel if like you had a week or two to kind of develop that, talk to Aaron now and see if we can have maybe a draft for approval by January 6th? Is that pushing it too hard?
Oh, that's okay. That's a month from now. That's fine. Okay.
Okay.
It's nothing.
It's done.
I could do that.
It's always easy to commit someone else's time.
Yeah.
I try not to do that.
Well, it's a month away. It sounds fine right now.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So the next piece is this idea around the committee developing a set of core design principles for conceptual redesign. I think this is a key part of our deliberations today. I think a set of principles can guide the committee's work, and any solutions can be tested against those principles. And some example in the thing I sent out, there are some examples of core principles. So, for example, one core principle, this is illustrative. This is not a proposal. The quote, the conceptual redesign maximizes the safety of all park users by physically separating rail trail users from other, what's the word you used? I'm gonna set that in from park users. So that's the principle, right? But in here, I added kind of defining who they were. So conceptual redesign maximizes the safety of all park users by physically separating rail trail users from park users. So that's an example of a principle that we could then test solutions against. Another might be a conceptual redesign stays within the existing footprint of the railroad right-of-way and town parcel. It's preferred to one that requires taking or use of other parcels. So that's another principle that we should say, do we want to stay here, or do we want to? It doesn't mean we can't go outside. What it means is this is a principle by which you use to judge the quality of the solution that we're talking about. Conceptual redesign should be inclusive and welcoming to all park users. Probably rail trail users also, but so those are some examples of principles. And I'd like to spend a few minutes kind of coming up with some principles that we can use and that will guide our work. So I'll open the floor to other members. And then at the end, I'm going to ask the public to add some or comment on it before we move to the next part of the meeting.
But these are like overarching requirements.
I think of requirements as, it's got to be 20 feet wide and 30 feet long. I think of a principle as it as we say here, it needs to physically separate. Yeah. I mean, it's sort of, there's a blurry line.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
I stole this idea from, design thinking principles.
Yeah.
So.
Safety.
So maybe to start, these illustrative ones, do we want to play with any of them and use them as potential input?
So I'm thinking our probably primary goal is the first one you said, maximizes safety. I would expand it. It says maximizes safety of park users. I think we want to expand it to include the three populations that we talked about.
Okay, park trail users and commuters.
Personally, I feel like the one about staying within the existing footprint would be maybe nice to have, but I'm not sure I would put it in the required initial category.
But we can judge two solutions, with that. So we may go to the town and say, look, we have two ideas. One, you take land and you do this. The other is you don't take land, you do that. And this was our principle in coming up with it. And then they can decide what makes the most sense, because one may be harder than the other.
Yeah, in my mind, I feel like some of the phrases used, like it says by physically separating trail users, like maybe that's what we think the best outcome is, but I don't know, maybe there's an outcome where you don't have to physically separate them, but somehow they can coexist more safely together. So I just, I think as we're going through this, we have to be careful that this doesn't use wording that's somehow going to conflict with a potential outcome.
Yeah, if you left it at just, the goal is to maximize the safety of the park users for these different types, you could probably just leave it at that, and then opens up the solution space, I guess.
Right. Okay.
The other question I'm looking at this, and I don't have an answer to it, but like, is there any trade-off to improving safety or some other type of thing we would judge potential solutions by. I'm not sure anything comes to mind, but just that was my reaction looking at it.
Probably aesthetics, I would think, right?
Yeah.
If we put too many signs, it might not be the
Totally,
beautiful Concord we
yeah.
love.
Well said.
So even could we say something like balancing the need to keep the park a like aesthetically pleasing outdoor space,
Well,
but also ensuring safety? Like you don't want to have like lanes of traffic suddenly going through this like beautiful West
Through
Concord.
the middle, right?
Yeah,
like maintaining the ambiance of the
right,
park
right.
while providing safety for
Mhm.
park
Yeah.
and trail users.
Maximizing safety while not compromising something.
Yeah.
Which is probably what you were going for with the inclusive and welcoming part.
Right.
So do you want to put those two in one principle, or say one principle is safety, another principle is aesthetically pleasing and welcoming and inclusive, and have them as two separate principles? And then our deliberation is going to be wrestling with that. I don't know if it makes a difference. I was curious what people think.
Yeah, I think it gives some structure to the wrestling process. So ways to evaluate things.
Yeah. I'm not sure if it matters if they're together or separate.
Okay, all right. But one is safety, the other is aesthetically pleasing, including inclusive and welcoming.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we should mention the three people that we talked about, the trail users, commuters, and
Park users.
park users. Shoot. Right.
So I just a quick clarification. Commuters are park users, are they not?
I think some
I think so.
commuters, they never actually like step foot off of the like track, right? They could park in that lot and maybe
Other side, right?
yeah, and then maybe they're kind of entering Junction Park territory, but they're staying near like the platforms for the trail. I'm sorry, for the train.
But if they enter the park, are they a park user? And if they're not in the park, do we care?
I think it's worth separating it
Okay.
in part because during the tour they talked about the complex arrangement of parcels where it's some
Got it.
MBTA, it's some private, it's some town, and then just trying to understand who's there and why, and then how do we meet their needs and balance maybe different needs.
Okay.
I would guess that the commuters have a different traffic pattern too than trail users and people who are just looking for a table to sit.
Okay, that's good. So we'll define, in principle, we'll define three types of users, and then we can use that definition in the rest of our principles.
And another question would be, if you've got commuters, there's the one approach from the Main Street side and one approach from the other side, more from the parking lot. And you may see different types of folks approaching the site, again, from a different way. I'm not sure it would make a difference, but just understanding like how people use it.
I think that makes sense if we want to spend a little time talking about each of the three groups. And like to add to that, I'm thinking park users might be kind of like wandering, not in a rush at all. Trail users might be speeding by, or at least they want to. And commuters probably are very targeted, like, where's my car? So maybe we think about where they're looking and or not looking.
So the area that we're working in does not include the parking lot. Right?
Yes. So maybe one clarifying question: does our scope include both the north and south side of the rail trail commuter park intersection?
Yeah,
Because we covered both on the tour and just sort of there's slightly different situations.
I think it does, because I think during the tour it came up the point that some people are on the rail trail going through the parking lot and then ending up in Junction Park.
Yeah.
So it really starts at that point where it bends off over the bridge and then winds its way along the side. Some folks apparently are ignoring that and going straight through the parking lots right over the commuter area right into the park.
Like the
Yes.
area next to where Marcia pointed out that the like bike shelters and like new racks are going to be. I think that's where a lot of us that hadn't been on that side before walking noticed how it becomes a little unclear where are you supposed to go.
You're supposed to
And I think the instincts of if you're a commuter just looking to get to the train, if you're a rail trail user trying to walk or bike or whatever, I think that the perspective of each of those people coming from that direction is very important, even though that extends beyond Junction Park itself.
So I'm going to defer to our select board liaison in terms of the area that we are focused on for conceptual redesign. It doesn't mean we can't make recommendations outside of that. But I'd like to be clear that I understood the select board is it's between the railroad tracks and Comm Avenue. And making sure that at the Club Car Cafe that the trail users go to the left and head around and follow. But Matt, any comments on?
My only comment is that we didn't have that level of precision. I couldn't speak for the board here, but I think we just were aware of a conflict. We were hoping you all would come up with proposals to resolve the conflict. I don't think we had any specific geographic area that we were, trying to constrain this to. So I doubt that there would be a complaint if you somehow, if it was essential to include something else that you did, in order to solve the problem.
Dorcas, you had
I think it is essential that we include the other side of the railroad tracks, not in the park, in order to get people to stay on the rail trail.
Right. Rather than cross the railroad tracks where the pedestrians cross.
Right.
I know, Marcia, you have a historical view of that crossing. Is there anything is there any reason to add any context to that right now, or just keep working on the principles? What's your thoughts?
I think just keep working on the principles. I know that the MBTA was not interested in discussing the existing pedestrian crossing as a potential bike path. But I know that people are using it in that way and in that fashion. So I think it's better just to focus on your principles right now.
All right, so the principle the principle that we're talking about is the what's known as Junction Park and the connected areas from a rail trail and commuter perspective. That's going to be kind of the locus of our work.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I think
a map, if that's helpful.
You have a map?
Is that helpful? It's just Google Maps. Up to you.
I think we have a sense of what it looks like. And I think we should focus on continuing the principle development. So one other thoughts about principles?
Maybe just make it clear what people are supposed to do. We want to improve safety, but to do that, well, maybe that's part of improving safety. I don't know.
I think that's good. I mean, I think we can build a set of principles and then winnow them back. And I think similar to what Tracy, you're going to do with the questionnaire. I'm taking down some notes, and with Adrian, I can kind of draft up. Here's what we heard, and then we can all comment on it in anticipation of our next meeting, when we can say, yeah, this is what we want.
Well,
So make it clear. Tracy, you were saying in principle to make it clear where the rail trail is, or
just where people are supposed to go. You know, it needs to be more clear for cyclists that they should get off their bike, more clear for pedestrians where they're supposed to walk. I found it very confusing.
Yep. Okay.
If we assume that there seems to be some consensus on these principles of the three constituencies plus safety, plus maintaining the park ambiance or whatever we call it. I mean, is that something we vote on, or we're just going to nod our heads and say that's fine? I don't know. I'm asking the question. I mean, do we want to have it like right now written up in a statement that we can then move forward with, or do we wait on that? I mean, how does it get actually codified so that we're all make sure we're talking about the same thing?
Do we maybe want to agree on the preliminary principles, and then maybe next month after we've had time to think, maybe we all spend more time in the park, and then we see if there's anything to add, we could revise them further.
Okay.
And vote on them in January.
Yeah.
Okay. So someone could draft what we understand. Matt can draft something that would then be circulated.
I will try and draft something that reflects the conversation and deliberations tonight.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. John.
I think, the more I think about it, I think one other aspect is to encourage the use of the park and the trail. We could come up with an interesting solution that in fact puts cyclists, for example, off using any of it. Just as my own use of the trail and my own routing through or around Junction Park, I think that a principle should be that we don't do anything that at least discourages the use of trail and park.
Great idea.
So what about something like a principle that we continue to encourage use of the rail trail and the park? Whatever design, whatever we come up with, continues to encourage the use of each type of user.
Exactly.
Okay. Okay. So other thoughts or principles?
On that note, maybe we want some sort of restriction on the amount of time that is added to people's commute or walk or whatever we're talking about, because we're trying to encourage them to do it safely.
Can you say more about that?
I'm just thinking, it might be safest to go like all the way down here and all the way to the left, but that would add too much time. So maybe we try to make it a direct approach as much as possible while still maintaining safety.
That I think also builds on what John was saying, right? That if you have a solution that's very safe,
That's
but
true.
It's gonna be very
Maybe that's
risky,
unnecessary.
Very inconvenient.
complex. So
It's
I think that's a
super
good
inconvenient
example
for
of.
people to do it. I think that's part of the problem now, is that it's inconvenient to follow the rules.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is a principle by definition of like how we're approaching this, or just something that we're obviously going to keep in mind. But I think throughout the process, like we are now in a lot of the community forums that sounds like we're planning, and the survey that Tracy and others are going to work on, I think we need to show that this is a community, that this is for community benefit, and this is this isn't because we're the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail and we want the rail trail to be the predominantly deciding factor in this outcome, but this is something that's being done for the betterment of the community. So I don't know if there's a way to capture that, or if that's kind of understood, but I could imagine if you're a park user, let's say, and you are discouraged by the fact that the rail trail now goes through the park, and you see, okay, well now the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Committee is the one designing this outcome. How do we help gain that that trust or that like transparency that we're doing this on behalf of, the broader Concord population, not with our Bruce Freeman hat on. So just a thought of capturing that somewhere.
Yeah, I think that one thing we talked about, Matt and I and Marcia, was the notion of making sure we're reaching out to the various constituencies. I know that there were people from the West Concord Advisory Committee and from the Cultural Council who were on the sidewalk. Perhaps we could individually be a liaison to some of those groups and seek out their input if we have the questionnaire, for example, or just conversationally, let them know, make sure they're aware of our meetings on these topics, and they could go back to their membership and say, you know, this is happening. Do you have other issues? And we could develop that relationship. I mean, I think we should talk to maybe liaison with people at the Council on Aging at Harvey Wheeler and the child care programs, because that's been mentioned as young children and older folks using as park users. The Concord Concord Park housing we could reach out to them and just explain what we're doing. And I think especially if we had the principals, that'd be a good starting point for a conversation, along with the questionnaire perhaps, and to keep those people in the loop, whether or not they're coming to our meetings, but we're soliciting, reaching out to them. I also think that at least the adjacent businesses, Woods Hill Table and the Car Cafe, should be made aware of this. And I don't know if thinking about getting involved with the MBTA is a little daunting, but they are a neighbor, and I think probably should at least be aware that something's happening. And Marcia probably has a contact at the MBTA who we could reach out to. So I don't know if that makes sense.
We have on the list, Richard, as a next discussion item, putting together a list of all of the people that we should incorporate in this. So I'd like to have you hold that, and then we'll bring it in to Adrian's comment about, for the benefit of the community, is the principle that we're undertaking this work collaboratively in service of all of the users of this part of Concord, and making recommendations and working through trade-offs, because inevitably some of us will be unhappy by what's decided, and some will be happy. And this is one of the challenges I think we have, is creating the space for everyone to come and say what they feel, recognizing that not everything can be done because it's physically impossible to do everything that everybody wants. And this is the challenging part, right? Is how do we create that space? And part of the reason for the principles is to say, this is what's driving our thinking. So if your main interest is racing through the park on your bike, you're probably not going to be pleased. But if we have to make changes to the design of the park, we're going to have to make trade-offs with people who spent many hours, working on the park and doing things. I think Dorcas and the Green Thumbs, the work that they're doing. But I like this side of your principle that we're doing something collaborative in service of all the users, and doing the best we can to make the recommendations and trade-offs that meet the principles that we're doing, meet the principles that we set up. So I've captured that principle roughly, I think, Adrian.
Yeah, well said. Thank you.
I'm not sure it's perfect yet, but others will help make it perfect. Let's see, Ned Perry, I think you raised your hand. We're in the middle of the deliberations, but if it's something about this point, please feel free to bring it up. Can you name and address?
Ned Perry, 362 Bedford Street. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I joined the conversation or joined the meeting late, so I may have missed this, but it's my understanding that there has been some discussion about having a short-term solution and a long-term solution, and I haven't heard that actually, but maybe I missed it. But I hope that with that bridge opening up over Route 2 next summer, that there will be a short-term solution that you all, and it's been a great discussion that you all are having about the three different groups and the safety. We've already had one death on the railroad tracks, and I hope we won't have more. And so safety should be crucial, but hopefully you will come up with a short-term solution and then a longer-term solution. Thank you very much for recognizing my hand.
Yes, Mr. Perry, yes, we do have the two deliverables are conceptual redesign for the long term, and included in the recommendation is a short-term proposal that augments the current signage and related communications that helps address increased ridership and use of the park due to the bridge opening. So we don't have any solutions yet, but it's on our remit.
Great, thank you very much. I'm sorry I missed it.
No, no worries, no worries. Other principles? I can roughly read through my notes as to what we have so far. I don't have them exactly right, but maximizing safety of the three types of users: commuters, trail users, and park users. We're going to define the three types of users up front. Balance the need to keep the park aesthetically pleasing while providing safety. It's something about inclusivity and welcoming. Principle that we're going to look at not just the park area, but also the area around it, north of the park itself. And then principle that helps make it clear where people are supposed to go. I think a term I learned recently was signifiers, right? That make it clear for folks. And then continuing to encourage the use of the trail in the park, a design principle that we don't discourage the use of the trail and the park by what we come up with. And then finally, something along the lines of a principle that's a collaborative effort to redesign in service of all of the users, and that will make our best efforts on recommendations and trade-offs in this process. Anything glaring, missing from other committee members? Okay, good work. I'd like to open it up to for a few minutes to the public. If you have any principles that you'd like to offer up that we might consider. And I see Dory Keogh has raised her hand first. Ms. Keogh, please introduce yourself and provide your address. You're muted, by the way. I'm sorry.
Dory Keogh, 51 MacArthur Road. And first of all, let me offer, last January, we reached out, I remember the Green Thumbs, and who did the garden design there a number of years ago. But in January, we reached out to a number of users of the park, Concord Park being one, the Children's Center, et cetera, in January. And at that point, I'd be glad to give you all the letters that we received from these groups. And they were then begging, please, please do something to make this safe. So now, 12 months later, it's wonderful to know that we're getting somewhere. It's taken a long time.
We're trying.
Well, we can only
Dory.
try. And so let me say how happy I am, and I speak for the Green Thumbs, who are there on their hands and knees doing gardening from May till October and have seen some sad near misses. And so anything that can be done will be a big step. But I want to make sure that I hope that you're not limiting yourselves, putting self-limits around what you can do. And one of them is to say that we don't have any money, we can't hire people. I really do think that you probably need some money, and any kind of a temporary solution, which we put up, I hope before June, is going to take money. And so I wonder if it wouldn't be an idea to think about putting in a very short, quick article for town meeting, asking for a certain amount of money to be voted by town meeting, so that you don't come up with some really good ideas to be in place in June when the bridge is done, and then to say, well, gosh, we don't have any money. So that's my first really suggestion. Anything you do is going to take money. The second is, I do have the sense that this committee is putting some limits on itself that the select board did not put. And that is to say, we are only going to look at property which is in the rail trail per area. There is an area beside the rail trail which adjoins the Woods Hill Table, which is owned by the MBTA, and which might be able to give up a tiny little bit of its space to make something possible. I think it's extremely short-sighted not to be looking at those possibilities. It's not going to cost you a cent. It's going to cost somebody who knows how to measure turning radius and all those magical words. But I wouldn't want you to be putting limits. And finally, I know that even when Nat Welch and I were down there talking one day, we counted the number of people crossing across the railroad track by the Club Car Cafe and not going where the now rail trail is designed. We have had, as Ned Perry just mentioned, a young boy who was crossing there with his girlfriend, both with headphones on. They crossed, the girl crossed, the boy crossed. Unfortunately, he and the train met. And for months, those of us down there working saw the sign and saw the memorial and saw the flowers. We cannot have another. That opening, that space is used by many, many, many more people than those who take the designated rail trail crossing down sort of behind Mandrioli Park, you know, down by the what we used to call when my son was little, the ding ding gates. And so I do really think that you need to be looking at this in a broad way. And I am enormously grateful that you're doing this. We and the Green Thumbs will do anything that you can suggest to help. And so don't limit yourselves, please, at the beginning, because you are answering something that I will send the packet of letters off to you, which shows the heartrending letters that came from these different people. And I want to quote one from Natasha Heimrath, who's the director of Concord Park Assisted Living. She made a very clear observation in her letter to us in January, and it might have even been December. And she said, bikes are a problem, but skateboards are equally a problem. So you're using, I think a lot of you are using terms like users and not just bikes, because it ain't just bikes. And so we really need to be thinking in the broad space of anything that is not a pedestrian. And finally, the number of people who use that park, I actually think it'll be interesting to do, as Tracy suggests, and some of you have suggested, doing a measurement of who uses what. But the point is that, again, Concord Park, which is made up of many elderly residents who've lived here all their lives, and many of them have trouble walking. But that is the place that they walk. They go across to go to the drugstore, to go to the beauty parlor or whatever. And they are a really strong group. So we don't need to set limits now by saying we can only do with what is in the rail trail. Try, you got to try. And I'm so pleased and thank you all. I'm sorry for taking so much of your time, but I do speak for all the members of the Green Thumbs who are so anxious to have this be a safe and the beautiful place that it is now. So thank you very much to all of you, really. I'm glad to see so many new members on your committee, and you'll bring good new ideas as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Keough. Appreciate that. Any other public comments on principles? Okay. So next step is, as we've discussed, I will write up what we've talked about and then share it back. Oh, Richard, go ahead.
I just want to follow up Dory's comment about the MBTA land parking lot. We had said, as you presented earlier, that we were sort of assuming we were going to stay on those two parcels of land. And so she's basically asking us, is that true? Or would we consider at least looking at the option of, 3 feet, 5 feet, 10 feet, a foot, or whatever of the MBTA land? Is that off the table, or can we?
I think the committee came up with the principle that we look at the area when we're not limiting ourselves to the park.
Okay.
That's what I heard from the committee members. If I misheard that, then we can correct it. But the principle I took down is to look at not just the two pieces of property, but the locus around, because the trail users are coming from both directions, pedestrians, commuters are coming. So I think by inference, that means, we should be able to look outside the park lines. And Mr. Johnson has said, has refused to say that we, in a detailed way, that we're sticking to that one thing. Just solve the problem is what the select board is asking for. Is that correct, Mr. Johnson? Solve the problem.
Yeah, if I can get off mute, yes. I think that's
Okay.
what, again, it's my own opinion, not the select board's position, because we didn't specify it, but I believe that's what it is.
Okay, all right, and you're here to help, as we go through this process, we're gonna be coming back to the select board, so your input's obviously important in that. So I think, Richard, that's the case. We're not stuck in a particular piece of property. The next, I think, and just to close, I will write these up and then share them, and then I think so we don't violate any deliberation component of the open meeting laws. People should respond individually back to me with any comments, and then I will draft a version of the principles for presentation of the January meeting, and then we can vote on them. Dorcas.
I really would like to make the meetings not virtual because I'd like to be able to look at a map when we're having our discussions.
Well, you're like the straight woman to the comedian, right? Because one of the items here is that our next meeting is going to be at Harvey Wheeler, and we've got Harvey Wheeler booked for all of 2022 to do our meetings. So you can do that. I will be safe if I'm at Harvey Wheeler, but so that's the plan. Marcia.
But just quickly that the Harvey Wheeler Community Center, you will have the clock tower room, which is a bit smaller. There is another group that has already reserved the auditorium every Thursday night. So you will only have the clock tower room, but they do have the capability of a hybrid meeting so that you would be able to provide both in person and Zoom for those who may not yet be comfortable meeting in person.
And if we wanted the auditorium, we would have to schedule a date and time that's not Thursday night at 7 o'clock.
Yes,
okay,
correct.
Which is fine. Okay, but Dorcas, I heard you twice now, I think, when you said, let's get together. So this will be good. So we have the clock tower room going forward. And Marcia, thank you to you and your staff for locking that in. The last item is, second to last item is what groups to include. We started to talk about that. What groups should we at least make sure we make aware of the work we're doing? I'm assuming the Green Thumbs are already aware. The 3 or 4 West Concord based committees, Richard, that you spoke about, which were what? The
West Concord Advisory Committee.
Yeah.
And the West Concord Cultural, whatever that is, West Concord Junction Cultural something or other.
All right.
We have already been attended the sidewalk. The Disability Commission, of course, but Mary Beth will be our connection to them.
Yeah.
And then I think the Carousel Preschool Children's Center at the Harvey Wheeler and the Council on Aging, I think, as well as Concord Park, as well as
Local businesses.
The adjacent businesses.
Okay.
Or other businesses potentially, but certainly the ones who are adjacent. And perhaps, I don't know, the library branch, I'm not sure about that, but it may not hurt to get somebody in the library branch. I mean, they've got connections to let them know we're doing it as well. And so perhaps each of us could take, some, if you've already got a connection to some of those organizations, we could do it that way. Or
well, I think the intent would be to make sure they're invited to be aware that we're having this conversation, and that they should subscribe to the Bruce Freeman Railroad Advisory Committee page. And as we develop meeting times and send out agendas, they will be informed that that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what we want to do. Adrian, were you going to suggest a group?
No, sorry, Richard was on it.
Okay, all right. The elderly housing, Concord, I forgot the name of it, right next to the train station. Excuse me?
Concord Park.
Concord Park should obviously be part of it. I have 2 hands raised. If you could hold on for a minute, I just want to get the rest of the stuff from the committee. Are there any other groups that are avid users of the park. I don't think there's a bicycling group in Concord, or is there?
Oh, definitely.
Monsters.
The Monsters.
Monsters, okay.
And there's probably 2 other clubs that go through Concord as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tracy,
All right.
you're a monster, right?
Don't call other committee
Well-
members names here. That's not
In the basement.
in the basement, right? Okay. Barbara, you were first?
Yes,
You
could you-
should be invited too, by the way.
Thank
Friends
you.
of the Bruce Freeman.
I'm finished. Take my hand down.
Okay,
Friends of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail would like to be included.
you shall be.
Thank you.
And in fact, I think I'm the official liaison from the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Committee to this committee, from the Friends to this committee. Dory, did you have a comment?
I did have a very quick comment, and that is when I forward you the letters from all of these organizations, it gives all their contact information. I think you can then use that to giving the names of the people at Concord Park Assisted Living and so on.
Okay.
I think that would be helpful for you all to do that. One other thing is, I noticed that the first meeting tonight of the Transportation Advisory Committee in Concord, which at first did have a bike component to it. They are now reorganized under new methodology or membership, and their meetings are going to be tonight. And that's unfortunate. So when Marcia or somebody mentioned that maybe there might be something to think about changing the evening, maybe you want to talk with whoever gets to be elected tonight, the chair of that committee. It was going to be the town manager, but he won't be any longer. And just to see how they're going to be meeting, because you're going to have a lot of interests from people from the biking component, people who had signed up and had been attending, concerns about this issue, and maybe you want to not exclude them. So I don't know how you're going to work that out, but just to give you a heads up to you that it might be worth finding out what their schedule might be, so you could coordinate.
Okay, good point.
Yes, that's actually was on our radar. Thank you, Dory.
Oh, good. Good.
Yeah.
We own this time. We own this time.
Well, do it. Hang on to that.
They're not allowed to take it. So, okay, so we have a list. And by the way, if we forgot anybody, they certainly are welcome to join. So no, this is not an exclusive list. We just want to make sure we're getting all the right people. And Dory, thank you for sending those folks. The last item are the set of questions that Richard was kind enough to record.
I have a question about the list. I mean, I was suggesting that people agree to be the liaison to the particular groups. Is that going to happen, or?
Well, so we have a lot of different groups that we're talking about, and so let's have a conversation about that. One option is to have each of us take on a different group that we work with, or multiple ones, because it sounds like there are a lot of people there. The other is to inform them that this process is going on and make them accountable for staying in touch with and knowing what's going on and asking us questions if they have it. So I think by how I answered, I've kind of revealed a bias on my part. I'd rather make them, inform them and not make them accountable.
I would suggest that we have an initial reach out, and then it's pretty much up to them to stay informed.
And how would you, we think like an email to all the people on the list and say, here's what's going on? A letter from us?
That's good. And then
I'm more inclined to say somebody, like talks to the oldsters, and somebody talks to the youngsters, like somebody talked to Carousel and Children's Center, somebody talked to the Concord Park and Council on Aging, somebody else talked to somebody else, and somebody stopped into the Club Cafe. Anybody customers of the Club Car Cafe, stop in, talk to the owner, let them know that we're working on this.
So we should probably have then an official little paragraph.
This is how you can be involved. This is how you can sign up on the website to get your notices. It's not all, to me, it's not crystal clear how you get news and notices from the town. You might have to walk somebody through it.
So Richard, do you want to draft like a one pager that we can use and share with anybody who we want to inform? So this is what's going to happen. This is what we're going to do. Here's how you can stay in touch. Here are the people to call. If you
Yeah,
have
well,
a
I think it would
question.
be good to have that, again, as I mentioned, once we have the sort of the principles involved, that would be good to include in that.
Okay.
So I think, yeah, we get the principles, I'll work on a piece that would go with that.
Okay,
And then we can
perfect.
think about who we want to contact in January. That sounds
All right.
good. Thank you.
Does that sound okay to other committee members?
Yeah, just to add quickly to that, I think, Richard, you raise a good point that I think there's members of the community that are going to get information about this project in lots of different ways and are going to feel comfortable engaging in lots of different ways. And so the sooner that we cast a wide net at communicating with people in the way that they may respond or see, I think will help us with the, pillars of like transparency and, including all these different groups.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Thank you,
We all
Richard.
want to reach out.
Sorry, Tracy, go ahead.
I was just going to add another group. I was going to say we could all reach out to our neighbors on next door, given we're probably all from different communities.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. Yeah. I haven't used Nextdoor, but my wife is an avid user. So, okay. Adriana, you've got most of this in the notes?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Thank you. So the last item are the questions that we received. I'd like to see if we can get done in the next 15 minutes, but the last item are the questions we received. There are 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 13 questions that came in. And so I sent copies to everyone. I think how do we want to respond? I mean, one thing we could do is we could try and answer each question, as a committee. But some questions are linked to others. And so one thought that we had was, committee members, if there's a particular question that interests you, for example, are there other examples of rail trails, intersection and active rail line? We could do some research on that, then come back. And, if we form one thought was we could form a subcommittee to kind of dive into this, but then that raises a lot of administrative and open meeting law questions. So one idea is that we take a look at the list and we say, well, this is a question I'd like to, do some research on and then share it back with the committee. How do people feel about that as an approach? Or should we even, any other ideas that we want to do? And Richard, you probably want to weigh in because you had some thoughts on this too.
Well, I think at some point we could hold those questions just in our mind as we go through actual scenarios of solutions, or in a couple of cases like the one about are there other examples of a park? Are there other examples of rail crossing? That would be worth trying to find some examples on what they've done. I mean, in advance. I think Deb was pretty interested in that, but she's also just did a thing on e-bikes for us. So the others I think are more specific to informing a specific course of action. So I'm not sure we can really answer that until we start getting into the nitty gritty of if we, what kind of barriers would we use? I mean, it sort of comes down into the 3 categories. I felt like, the wayfaring idea, the idea that where you're supposed to go through signage or some other means of fairly passive ways of doing it, to creating barriers that prevent you from doing something, or then ultimately separating everything at a crucial point, so that there can't be, or would be highly unlikely there'd be a conflict. So in each of those cases, those questions sort of apply, I guess.
So any questions really, thank you, Richard. Do any questions pop out that people are really hot on and want to take on and do a little research? Or should we just keep these in mind as we move forward?
To me, they seem like questions that we just keep in mind. I also feel like it would be helpful if, just as we're going about our lives, we take pictures of different intersections where this situation might present, and just start kind of a library, and we can start looking at things and picking out features we like from each one.
Yep. A couple of these, like, should various property owners be brought together to discuss solutions? And in some sense, that's what we're going to offer in the public hearing. Is there any mechanism to enforce walk your wheels? I mean, that's part of, I think, our deliberations of what Richard said, which is, do you create signifiers that make it obvious to people what they should do, et cetera. Okay.
And Nat, I think one on there that all of us can also do some like reflection or review on is like, do we know of any contacts in our personal lives that might be able to help benefit this project with their like expertise? Like, I think someone had asked, like, are there any landscape architects that would be willing to like lend their time to this project? And so
Right.
if all of us can just think about maybe people that we know, even if it was to consult for an hour or two and, apply their knowledge, is there any type of skill set that exists out there that, because we don't have budget right in this exploratory phase, anyone that we could tap into?
I don't think we have the time, but you remind me of I'm sure there are a couple of good architecture schools nearby that would love to wrestle with this problem.
It's a
as
good
part
like
of
case
our,
study for someone, yeah.
yeah, it's like
an intern.
or the Harvard School of Architecture. Hey guys, come take a look. Tell us what you do. It wouldn't cost us anything, and it might take a long time. But you're reminding me of who is in our network, who do we know. Also, there are people in the space who could really be creative. So
I love that idea. And it's perfect timing actually, because the semester would start in January and probably end in May.
all right, so Tracy, who do you know?
Well, I'm thinking about the Harvard Extension School out of Cambridge. I'm
Yeah.
sure there's something, I can look into that.
Okay.
Yeah, there's the whole graduate school of design at Harvard.
There's gotta be somebody who want to help with this.
Yeah, I mean, the constraint is it would be, they might come up with some interesting things, but in the end, we'd have to, share it with the, with the public. But I think, having someone come in from the outside and wrestle with these kinds of problems is interesting. The question is, do we have the time to do that?
Yeah. Or
Mr.
even just making sure that there's someone locally, attends a forum so they can, raise ideas. So even as something as simple as that.
Yeah, I mean, we could have a class trip from the Graduate School of Design. Come on out and then attend the public hearing. Mr. Johnson, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that a few years ago, actually, we had a similar kind of situation we were facing in West Concord, just around, potential design of the building 13B Commonwealth Ave. At that time, there had been a few different go-rounds with design, and we weren't really getting anywhere. So we did some outreach to local architects and did end up speaking with someone who's a professor of architecture, about the interns and all of that, and whether this be a class project and all of that. And I think that Marcia may be aware that we ended up doing some work with the firm that professor is associated with, related to the Aspet River footbridge, but that, we have investigated this kind of approach before. I don't know that it necessarily works out so simply to just go and try to find interns and stuff. There's all kinds of strings attached.
Got it.
Do that. But nonetheless, it is worth reaching out, and you can end up in some interesting other, results as a consequence.
Yeah, and we don't have to take their ideas, but just the conversation can be helpful.
Yeah. So Marcia may have more to add.
Marcia, go ahead.
Well, I was actually going to piggyback on Tracy's comment about an idea library. The West Concord Advisory Committee actually did a walkabout for local streets and how to improve pedestrian and bicyclist safety. And they came up, they have an idea board that they have posted on their website. So if you were to go to West Concord Advisory Committee, on the left-hand side of the page is a column of different items, and in that is their idea board. So there might be something there.
Cool.
And we could do something very similar for the Bruce Freeman.
It would be better though if we did it, just so you know. I just want we want to be competitive with West Concord. All right, that sounds great. Thank you for that, Marcia. We'll take a look at that. Okay. Any other questions or comments about the questions? And Tracy, if you find anything interesting, let us know. So, the last item is upcoming meetings. So we're scheduled to have a meeting on the 6th of January. That's our next upcoming meeting. Do we need to pick anything, any time right now to set aside, or should we wait until we have enough work to do until, keep us busy until January, and we can decide then when the first public meeting is going to be? Is that
I think so.
okay?
I do have a couple of other items brief on the agenda. One is at the last meeting we discussed having someone kind of stay on top of a path to the middle school, knowing that nothing's going to happen immediately, but looking at that, either improving existing conditions in a way that doesn't trigger full-scale operation or trigger a full-scale operation at some point. So I don't know if there's anybody on the committee who has a kid who is at least, going to be in the new middle school in the next, I don't, for example, and just occasionally be aware of it. Is there anybody who would want to volunteer to do that? Just so it stays on the committee's radar. And the other one is the prison cemetery project. I'm interested myself in continuing to be the liaison with that. If someone else would like to participate, that's great, but I have a particular interest in that. So I don't know if anybody's interested in the middle school. Doesn't mean you don't have to do anything really for the time being, it's just be aware.
Yeah, I'm happy to stay connected with the middle school project. Just like on a personal note, I'm trying to stay up to speed on their plans and attend as many of their forums as I can. Yeah. So I'm happy to have my
kids.
What?
Your kids are still young though, right? How?
Yeah, but no, my oldest kids are going to be the first year to have like a first full year there. So their 5th grade year is when the school is going to open. So yeah, all 3 of our kids will attend the new school. So I'm trying to stay as connected to all of it as possible. Okay, I think Sam, you're probably in a similar position as well.
Great.
Okay, good. Yeah, we want to keep their feet to the fire in a nice way about keeping the idea of a path.
Just aware that we,
yeah. That we're not going away with regard to connecting the school and the path, but in a nice way, of course. And then we
also got didn't we get a letter from somebody about what's going on with the Williams Road flashers and whether
yes, we
activated by you have to stop and activate them, or they're going to be activated on their own?
They're in.
They're in.
Whatever they are, they're installed.
Right, Barbara mentioned that. Yeah.
Right. Do we know how they're activated?
I believe that it is it should be in the pavement. Okay. And you don't have to manually hit a button. Okay. And this was part of the shared streets and spaces grant that the town received last summer, or this past summer actually. And it's part of the Public Works engineering division is supervising that work, but it was out of the comments that were received at the Transportation Advisory Committee last spring from some of the Old Marlboro residents.
Right, there's some real concern. Yep.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Is that so? There's Williams Road, and then there's the one closer to the middle school.
What's being added at the middle school area? There's several things. There's the flashers for the rail trail. And then there will be speed alert signs. So if you're going over the speed limit, there'd be a flashing sign to indicate that you're over and what your speed is. And then they are upgrading the flashers at the school itself.
Okay.
So a series of traffic safety measures that we're implementing.
Great. Perfect. Thank you so much. Any other member questions or comments? Okay. Open up to the public. Do any members of the public have anything that they'd like to raise or comment on? Okay.
I know I'm a member of the committee, not the public, but I just thought of this. If we do decide, Marcia, to lower the request to CPC and kind of push out the work, I'm just trying to think, is there any follow-up that we have to do with the Stone Root members just to provide transparency. I knew there used to be a large number of them that attended these meetings, and I think because they've been pending CPC review, they haven't been attending. So just trying to think of the best way to keep them informed of some of the changes there, so they're not surprised if they see like the outcome of a CPC vote or review.
I think that's a really good point. I do know that members of residents of the Stone Root Lane were in attendance at the CPC meeting on Tuesday when I was asked to sharpen my pencil. So, but I'll draft a letter for discussion, or maybe I should just send that out. What would you prefer, chairs?
I think send it out. I mean, you know, that seems to me to be the fastest way to do it if you wait for us. I mean, you've been working this for quite a while, so.
All right, I
That's
can
my
send out a
thinking.
letter indicating
Yeah,
that
and
this is what had to happen.
I think that's a really, you know, great, just keeping them in the loop. And it's
Yep.
really up to the town meeting ultimately, or first of all, it's Community
that's true.
Preservation Committee to vote. So they're welcome to make their case if they're not happy with exactly where it is right now.
Yep.
It seems as though it's moving in the direction they want it, but if it's not satisfactory, it's really not out of our hands at this point. So,
But whatever is recommended at town meeting cannot be increased. It can only
Right.
be decreased. And so that's
so
that's
it's
the
Community
dilemma.
Preservation Committee, right? But
Right.
if they're telling you what to do, you pretty much know where they're going.
So Adrian, thank you for bringing that up. I like the being proactive. And Marcia, you're comfortable with sending something out to them?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's great. Okay.
Question.
Our next meeting will be January 6th, 2022 at 7 p.m. at Harvey Wheeler Center, the Clock Tower room, which I've never been in, but I'm looking forward to.
Is
If
it
there's
high
no-
up in the building? Does we get to climb up there? You know, it's like that Alfred Hitchcock movie. They're climbing up the clock tower or something.
Could be,
No.
could be, Richard. I don't know. I'm just
No.
like, I'm shaking with anticipation now to be
No.
there. January.
You wouldn't know that there was a clock tower anywhere when you're in the room.
It's the
Okay.
small room off of the kitchen as you right across from the auditorium.
Does that mean
But I
our-
would actually qualify it.
I think
I
I
don't
did
think of it
yoga
as
in there.
small. I think of it as pretty big relative to the auditorium. It is small, but it's a big room.
It's not
You
a
could put
small room. Yeah.
50 people in there if you
Yeah.
need to.
Is
Are
that
hors
still
d'oeuvres
hybrid?
on-
Some members
ahead.
of the public could still attend remotely if they wanted to,
Oh, yeah.
or I guess members.
Marcia said that they will be trained in the equipment by that time.
Yeah, before we adjourn, I just want to reiterate the real pleasure I have in seeing all these new members, particularly the younger folk.
Yeah.
And also I want to thank Matt for putting all this extra time into, kind of coherently get us going on this process. As he said, it's kind of amorphous and complicated. And I think the work he did to make this outline was really, really useful tonight. And I really appreciate that.
Thank you. I'm not sure it's coherent, but I really
Well,
appreciate the opportunity to have all of you here.
More than a blank slate,
Right.
So,
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you to the new members. And I think with that,
we need a
like
motion.
a motion to close, to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Second,
Okay. Roll call. Ms. Boardman,
I
Mr. Follander,
Aye.
Ms. Hansen,
Aye.
Mr. Soden,
aye.
Mr. Stearns. Mr. Stearns, is he?
We don't need it.
We don't need him. Okay, Mr. Welch says yay. The meeting of the BFRTAC is finished as of 8:51 p.m. Thank you all. Have a very happy holiday, and we'll see you next year.
All right.